right, I finally was able to finish the second part of the Beathawk tutorial. And I guess it's probably better it took long because I refined the song a few times and now I think it's much better. Okay, so if you watched part one of the tutorial, we're working now with the tracks we imported from Beathawk, and now I'm adding a Nave synthesizer so that I can do some atmospheric stuff at the beginning. So I'm going to record the atmospheric stuff, then I'll go back and tweak the velocities in Cubasis in the MIDI editor, do a little bit of editing there, and then I'm going to assign a kind of chaos pad inside of Nave. You'll see here in a second. So that sound effect that's going, that's the Nave pad, and then I'm going to turn up the reverb in the sound effect. In Cubase, they automatically assign a reverb to the sound effects, you just have to turn it on. So that'll give it a lot more space. So then I'm going to add a dub station delay into the insert. Then I'm going to make some adjustments to the notes that I played, and then I'm going to automate an XY filter inside of the Nave plugin. So yeah, this is the third editing page. You can see by the blue highlighted thing on the top left what page it is of the Nave plugin. I assigned a wave pitch to the X-axis and an oscillator pitch to the Y-axis of the XY pad in Nave. And then you hit record right there. There's a little button. You can see it with the Cubasis logo, and you hit record, and that is your automation. So what that does is it kind of takes the sounds and does a kind of filter thing to it, and you'll hear it. So then I freeze the Nave track and make it into an audio track, and I'm going to automate some turntable effects or tornado effects over the what I've done so far. And the reason I froze it was so that I wouldn't lose all that work somehow. I mean, I still have the frozen track that I can unfreeze and go back to, but sometimes it's just easier to work with a frozen track. So what that did is it took just a pad and whooshy sound and added some rhythm elements to it. So now let's play it with the track so you can hear how it fits in. So as you can see, I am now using Tornado to add some percussive elements and rhythm to this whooshy pad. Okay, so next I'm going to add a Synth Master 1 plugin that later is going to play an arpeggiator or arpeggiated sound. But to begin with, I just hit it briefly instead of holding it for an arpeggio, and it makes a kind of a bell sound. So it works as a dual kind of sound purpose for this song. Okay, next I have another Synth Master 1 plugin that I use also later to double the arpeggiator sequence in the middle, and I also use it just as a single tone in the beginning, making it a dual purpose sound as well. And then a little later when we get to that midsection, you'll see what preset it is, and then you'll be able to see clearly what preset I'm using for both of these sounds. So next you're going to hear that I added a chugging part on guitar into the beginning, and I left a clean version because it kind of sounded like a mixture of Pink Floyd with the distorted one, and there wasn't really a lot of clarity because there was a lot of delay on the distorted one. So I combined the two tones together. So I think that pretty much does it for the first part of the intro. And now let's listen to the whole thing together. So the original audio that we created in Beathawk went to about measure 59. Then there was nothing. So I went back and basically copied the section that was right before 59 for 8 bars and made a new section by transposing anything that had notes or melody up 3 half steps. And so we're going to go through the individual parts that I used from before. And basically what my technique is to strip it down a little bit and then build it up. So you will see that the bass doesn't even come in at first, and when it does, it fades in. Some of the drum loops come in right away, but there's one of the loops I cut into pieces and leave spaces. So we're, just little things to make it slightly different. And then the second half of the section, I don't cut anything out, but I cut much smaller pieces of the loop and put them together. So it's still different than the first. It's the same audio, but it's rearranged slightly different. Same with the pieces below. Instead of it being one steady stream of loops, I cut them into smaller pieces and then cut and paste them right next to each other, copied them. Again, that was the same audio from before, so we didn't create anything new. We're just manipulating the audio that we had before to make a new part. And so here I will show you the individual pieces that I kept. Okay, so ultimately, besides copying over the pieces that were there, then I added some new instrumentation, which was an arpeggiated sequence and another drum loop. And then also you can see there's one shots right there. Those tracks that are soloed. I brought up a kit that comes with Cubasis, and made a crash cymbal sound. And one of them has more effect on it than other, and so I'm kind of blending them for volume and just density. And so I use them for crashes, not only in the news section, but also a little bit before that. And so that is a new element. And then I'm going to show you what keyboards I added to that section. Then after that, I added a drum loop from the Cubasis loop library that comes with the program. And this comes in at the second half of this section, so that basically it builds up and gets thicker towards the end of it. And you'll notice that I basically used the bass line, some of the drums, and thinned out the part a lot so that I could make room for these new arpeggiated sequences. So I didn't use all the tracks, I just used certain tracks. And that created a new part. And then after that, I will transpose back down and copy some more audio from the song previously and add some synths to it. So after I solo each one of these and you hear them then together, I'm going to continue to add the extra parts that I put in, solo them out, and demonstrate what they sound like with or without any effects that I used, and you'll hear the whole part come together by the end of. Next, I created a lead sound with Sugar Bites Unique. So the first thing I did was thin out the EQ a bit. I added a wah pedal effect that comes with Cubasis. Then I used an instance of Dub Station to give it a kind of a twangy, short reverb kind of a sound. And then I used another instance of Dub Station. To kind of double the tempo, and then here's what it sounds like with all of them on. So after that, to extend the song, I basically just made a copy of one of the main sections from earlier, and I didn't have to transpose anything because it was already in the key from earlier. And took some parts out and added some parts so that it would be different than the first time. I took that sound that I found with the unique synth, came up with a part right here that you'll see me editing, and you'll hear when it's done. So the next section is just a continuation of copying the audio files over, same key, and thinning them down and adding some other instrumentation in order to make it sound a little bit different. And each time I do that, I usually strip out a few things and then end up putting more in by the second half of that section each time it builds again. So as you can see, I'm using the third arpeggiated sound from the newest section that I put in after it was created in Beathawk at measure 59. And I'm making a whole nother arpeggio sequence right here at the next newest part. And then when it goes into the very last part, which is going to go to the outro, I just have a single note, and so it's basically doing a rhythm. And then I use an EQ to fade out the highs and lows and basically fade it down in the mix as everything else is fading out. So with the outro track, the outro part, I ended up copying the part that we created for the intro, all the sound effect. It's a 2-channel track from Nave that we had frozen before. I copy that to the end and I fade it out. I create a duplicate of that and reverse it, meaning I reverse the audio. There's a function in Cubasis where you can reverse the audio, but you double click on the waveform, it opens up the wave editor, and over on the left is a choice that says reverse. So I reversed that and had them both going, and then automated a pan so that each of those tracks would go back and forth between the right and left side. And then anything else that I have going on besides those sounds, I fade out, so that the whole thing just creates an effect of everything just kind of dies down into oblivion. And then the last thing that I do to finalize the track is I put a version of Tornado on the master bus, and I do a little bit of automation during the breaks because I copied all the breaks from before, and I changed some of them a little bit by cutting up the audio, but most of them are just pretty much the same thing that they were recorded in Beathawk. And so I'm using Sugar Bytes Tornado to alter those breakdowns so that each one is a little bit unique and not boring to the listener. So I should also mention that generally automation is done by hitting the red R, the red W, and the green R is for read, the W is for write, and when the write button is on, any knobs that you change on an interface, let's say the knobs or sliders in Tornado, they will be automated. But if you want to go back and edit those are represented by line curves. And so the bottom of the screen is the dial turned all the way off, and the diagonal line up towards the top right represents the knob being turned all the way to the right. So sometimes you do these knob turns with your fingers or on a PC with a mouse, and it just doesn't come out perfectly timed, and it messes up the song slightly. And if you leave it, it just sounds like a mistake. So you have to actually go in and fine-tune these edits, or just create them from scratch in the first place. And so that usually takes some drawing in and then listening and then moving it a little bit and drawing in and listening until you get it just right so that it sounds like something that you can live with or enjoy. And so yeah, that's the two different ways of automating. This way can be a bit of the pain in the butt in Cubasis because it's hard to get any degree of accuracy with your fingertip. And then you have to zoom in and out, and so it is a little bit harder than if I had a mouse to make these clicks. But it's not impossible, and you get faster at it the more you do it. So I'm leaving some of my editing process in this tutorial, and you'll notice later that by the time the song was done, these parts are even different. The reason that I left these in was to kind of show you the process, that it doesn't always just happen right away the way that you want it to happen, or you don't have a vision you're fulfilling. A lot of times it's just an experimentation, and you may go to have an idea to go try some stuff and all of it is garbage, and then you revert back to having nothing. But you won't find out until you do the experiment. And so you'll see here as I'm editing, you hear a lot of different versions of the glitch effects, and a lot of them don't sound good, and when they don't, then I go back and I do it again, and I listen and I do it again. So sometimes it's a very tedious process in taking the same audio and making it into something different, because you have to find new ways to be creative each time. So you just gotta kind of tinker around until you hear something that you haven't done before. So originally I had recorded everything as I was making it, and so you would have seen it sequentially in the order that I put things in. But I accidentally erased all my video, so I had to go back and make new video after the fact, after I'd already pretty much finished the song. And so then I did a little bit more editing that I didn't think I was going to do to finish the song. I heard it a couple times and thought it was missing something, or it had too many parts in a section. So I'm going to go over basically all the bits and pieces that I added, and as much as I can. Hopefully I won't miss anything. But I'm going to have a copy of the project file for download below. So you can, if you have Cubasis, you can load it into your DAW and take a look firsthand and solo stuff out and see what it is that I used, what I used from audio from Beathawk, and what I created newly in Cubasis, and how I arranged it. So if any of what I'm saying doesn't make sense, or you feel like I jumped around a lot, or I missed something, it'll be in that file, and you'll be able to analyze it just by looking at it and soloing stuff out. Okay, I added in an arpeggiated sound at the very end that's different than any of the other arpeggiated sound parts, and I used the third instance of Synth Master 1 that we used in the first new section with the key change. It was number 3, and it was the sound that came in halfway through. So now I'm using it as its own sound here, so it's not competing with the other two sounds, and it's its own thing. And then after it does a few arpeggiated notes, it's going to hold one note, and which is basically kind of a rhythm, and then I'm fading down the EQ, automating it so that it will fade out of the song by using the EQ to bring down the volume. This is one way to do it. You can use a volume slider, you can use a plugin that has a volume knob on it, and I'm just taking and fading the EQ curves down in real time with my fingers while having the right button on, and then if the red read button is on afterwards, it'll repeat everything that I did every single time. Measure 76 is another change in the song, and so I added two keyboards that came straight out of Cubasis, or two patches, and they're basically rhythmic. So I just played one note, one key on the virtual keyboard, like that, and then I doubled it and had a different sound, panned them hard right and hard left, and that kind of gives the song a chugging kind of effect right when you get there. And this is where I discovered that screen recording your iPad is in mono, because I had one sound panned all the way to the left and you couldn't hear it at all when it was soloed. So in the future, for this kind of stuff, I'm going to have to use screen mirroring onto my computer, because that captures it in stereo. Bummer. So the tutorial you will hear in mono, and basically what I'm doing from a production standpoint. But when I have the playthrough at the end, I will mix down the audio in stereo and use the video editor to put in a stereo file. So then at the very end, you get to hear it, what it's supposed to be like in full stereo. Also, besides Tornado, a couple times I used the DJ effects from Spin Effects in Cubasis as well, just for little fills or breakdowns. Here's an example of how I took audio that was one big long track from Beathawk and cut it up into some new little pieces so that it would take the same part and make it sound different when I used it different later in the song. Didn't like the really simple bass line from the very beginning. In fact, it's one of my pet peeves about dance music, is that they do all this clever stuff, but they don't play a bass anything like what a real bass player would play. It's very predictable, and it works for the most part. But I prefer to add into dance music a bass part that is closer to something somebody would actually play. Okay, so first we'll explore the synth that I used for the bass to replace the bass from Beathawk. I ended up using Unique, which is by Sugar Bites, and I used a patch called Dave Growl, and all I did was I turned up the cutoff frequency a little bit and the resonance a little bit. I have one gap right there that I need to fill, and then when that gap is filled, then I have a bass line for the whole track. So I figured I'd film me doing that real quick. Okay, the last thing that I probably forgot to cover is that all the transitions, you know, where it stops and does a fill, when it finally, that transition is over, instead of like a crash cymbal a drummer would play on a drum, I have some sort of a impact or hit and some sort of a swell. So that's what these are. I'm going to play them all individually and then together with the music, and then you'll hear what they do. And now after all those little details, here is the final playthrough of the whole song. Knew you had the song all pegged. Didn't know it was going to have a way cooler bass line, did you? There's always got to be a little surprise. Always. Okay. I hope you dug it. I'm going to post the Cubasis files, and all of the MIDI will be frozen, so you won't need the plugins that I have. However, if you do go out and buy the plugins, you can unfreeze those tracks, and then you'll have access to the individual MIDI files, and you can zoom in and see exactly what I did. Everything from... Okay, hope you dug it. I'm going to make more of these. Let me know if you have any particular genres or type of thing that